Hi, this is Regina Y. Favors with the Social Psychology Topics lesson. And the title of this lesson is Power Dynamics and Rebound Relationships. And I basically want to introduce you to the 6 power principles. And so this is very, very important to consider when you are thinking about your romantic relationship, just in general, and then the power dynamics within a rebound relationship, because someone in a rebound relationship always holds the power, and it is usually the rebounder. And you usually enter rebound relationships unknowing that you are a rebound. The person who created or formed the rebound relationship is very clear about the role you are playing. That's why we always hear this, like almost like a life mantra, that nobody marries the rebound. So, whatever view that person is pushing or belief system that person is pushing, it is that relationship, that rebound relationship is going to be sustained as long as you continue to give your power over. But once you realize who you are to that person, then the power shifts. And once you begin making decisions to exit that rebound relationship, it it just continues and continues to shift until you have completely exited the relationship. So take some time to listen to this lecture, gain some insight. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell if you are interested in further videos. This is Power Dynamics and Rebound Relationships, Introduction to the 6 Power Principles. This lecture is subject to fair use, so where I will comment, criticize, teach, as well as offer scholarship. What is social psychology? Social psychology is the branch of psychology that deals with social interactions, their origins, and their effects on individuals. Each person's behavior is influenced by the social environment in which the behavior takes place. Social psychology is the scientific study of behavior of individuals within both social and cultural settings. It is the study of human social behavior that is distinct from the study of social activity of laboratory animals. It utilizes the scientific method to study human behavior. Beginning in the United States at the end of the 19th century, research in social psychology emphasizes scientific study of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as psychological variables influenced by actual and/or implied presence of other people. It is important to study social psychology because it helps to predict behavior patterns before they occur and to design interventions as solutions. So here's a quick research disclaimer. The ideas represented within this audio lecture do not reflect empirical research. This research does not directly utilize a survey and/or measurement tool. However, the ideas are supported by empirical research. Statistics are gathered from statistics gathering organizations and empirical-based journals. This PowerPoint audio lecture begins the research process for developing research hypotheses and survey instruments. It also extends the research conducted during a previous series, Understanding Relationship Failure, which is available on YouTube. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to do the following. So define the 6 power principles, apply one or more power principles to a current or past romantic relationship, and then reflect on the role of power in romantic relationships just in general. And this is very important to consider because the reason why I think we continue to enter relationships and continue to get hurt by them is because we are not taking time to actually reflect. Why did that relationship fail? First of all, we're not even calling it a relationship failure when it actually is a relationship failure. Because if you call something a failure, you begin to think, then where did I go wrong? Where did he go wrong? Where did we both go wrong? What should I do next? But if you call it a success, and the way that you call it a success is you jump from relationship to relationship. Never mind that you're leaving behind carnage, but you don't see it that way, because as long as you can get another relationship, you have an ego boost, and then you feel justified and validated that, okay, it wasn't me completely in that previous relationship. So think about this as you are going through this lecture, especially when it comes to the role of power in romantic relationships, just in general. Power dynamics in rebound relationships is similar to partner engagement in traditional relationships. The difference is that the rebound relationship begins voluntarily on one side of the relationship and involuntarily on another side of the relationship. The person who is a rebound is unlikely the initiator. This lecture explores the 6 power principles and the role of power to influence others and resist the influence of others. Power is only effective when someone is perceived as powerful and exerting direct influence. People are only considered powerful based on perception and their dominance over others. So, this is the role of power, how it influences relationship dynamics. So, what is the role of power? Power is a guiding principle of the sex ratio hypothesis. Now, don't forget this recap. Oversupply of unmarried women gives men power in romantic relationships. Okay. Relationships in general are characterized by a struggle for power, whether they are sex-based or marriage-based. The pursuit of power is prevalent in friendships, romance, marriage, and family. So there's always going to be some kind of power struggle. I was thinking about something that Laz Alonso said about his friend Melissa Ford, and he was saying, and her podcast, I'm Here for the Food. She was interviewing him along with her co-host Blue, and he was talking about an ex or something like that, and the fact that he and Melissa have been friends for 15 years, and that any woman that he gets might have a problem with Melissa because she's gorgeous. And she's a very beautiful woman, gorgeous woman. Many men love her, and she looks like a sweet woman. But immediately when he said that, that was a turnoff for me, not because I want to look like her or not because I think she looks better than me. She has her look, I have my look. That wasn't the problem. But immediately when he said that many women might have a problem with him being friends with her because of how she looks, and they might be intimidated, and that they might want to, break up the relationship or whatever. But the problem is that he gave that situation power. So if she is so gorgeous and she looks so wonderful, then why isn't he married to her? Because he's going to compare his future whomever, whether she becomes a wife or girlfriend, long-term partner, to Melissa, because his mindset is already in a way of thinking about her being a gorgeous woman. So anyone who comes to engage him has to either look like her or look better than her, right? And that's the thing that I have so when he said that he gave her power, so then because he gave her that power, when she steps into a room, like for instance his house, and he is there with his girlfriend, she automatically has power, because the way he perceives her in terms of her physical attractiveness as being more powerful than any other woman who does not look like her. So that means that whoever he chooses, that person has to really look a lot better than her. And if she doesn't, then his thinking is already like, well, she's not like Melissa anyway. She's not as gorgeous, so she can be tossed at will. That's kind of not fair. You can say how whomever whoever is pretty, you can say however way they look pretty, that is your prerogative. But if you are interested in marrying somebody, you definitely should not call another woman gorgeous, especially if you are considering marriage. So I wanted to kind of throw that in there because we're about to get into a discussion of power. So power in relationships is defined in two ways. So we can define power as the ability to influence others to do what we want. And then we can define power as the ability to resist the influence of others. So again, we can define it as the ability to influence people to do what we want. And we could also hold the power to resist the influence of others. Only the person who has effected change in another person is influential and thereby has exerted power directly or indirectly. So when there's an oversupply of women in the market and men want sex, the woman who gives in and has sex with the man's demands has basically given up her power. If you set a goal to not have sex while you are dating someone and engaged, and then you turn around and give up the sex, then you've just given over your power. You've just lost power. These are the 6 power principles, the economy of sex. So there are 6 power principles, and I'm considering making a separate audio series based upon these principles. So let's go over them. So power as perception, power as a relational concept, power as resource based, power as less dependence and interest, power as enabling or disabling, and then power as prerogative. So let's go through each individual. So power as perception is defined within social and relational contexts. People who engage in powerful communication may not always be perceived as powerful. If a person does not perceive another person as powerful, then behavior is not dominant. Others are powerful only to the extent that we believe them to be powerful. And our perception of them as powerful really depends on their influence. If they are influential and to the point that they change a person's behavior, then they are exhibiting and expressing power. But if they can't change anybody's behavior or change anybody's thinking, they're not powerful, or at least not considered powerful. Some people may have objective power but also have trouble influencing others. Objective power is that power associated with wealth, prestige, position, and or strength. So we automatically perceive, say, like the billionaire. Let's look at Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, any of the celebrities who have sort of like play powerful roles, maybe like the quarterback of a team or something like that. But there is objective power. We automatically perceive them as being powerful. Now, it depends though, however, because the one with the wealth, prestige, position, and or strength is the one who actually has the power. The celebrities might have influence, right? I think that's a little different because, you know, celebrities still are up under the thumb of studios and industry execs and, organizations or whatever. Unless they have their own studio and have their own network, cable network or something like that, they don't really have a whole lot of power. But they can have high influence. Real power is predicated on someone with objective power influencing others and perceived as powerful. So Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, or any of the network owners or football owners or whatever, we know them to have not only objective power, and they are also perceived as powerful. Power as a relational concept. So power exists in relationships. Power is always a relational concept. An individual cannot be powerful without someone else being less powerful. So that's why we often have these going back and forth in relationships because everyone is trying to um, take the power reins, right? And no, and in romantic relationships, really, there's no such thing as equal. Even if you have, even if you make exactly the same money. Now, you can be partners, romantic partners, in terms of life, but there's always one who is more powerful and more influential, and one who is less powerful and less influential. And it's usually the man. It's usually the man. He's head of house, and so there's a clear hierarchy, and I always go back to the Bible. God made man first, and so there's already an existing hierarchy. I don't care if the woman makes more money than he does. The male voice is still, um, the more powerful voice, because a man can just sit back and let you do everything you want to do as a woman, be independent, pay all the bills or whatever, and run yourself down. And he can sit back and just let you do it. And men will do it. They're not going to let you drive the car while they are driving. So once you sort of understand that, you understand that eventually you're going to have to give up the reins. You can still make decisions in the house as a marital partner, but eventually you're going to have to give up the reins to a sort of higher authority. And that's in every situation. That's not being offensive. You have a boss. You don't own your own company. And even if you own your own company, you still have to report taxes. You still have to adhere to state and federal laws. You still have to meet industry, licensing types of requirements. You cannot operate in the industry without like a certain license. If you are an accountant or financial investor, right, you need to take the Series 7 test to be a trader, things like that. So you're still always subject to a hierarchy. So that's not something for feminists, right, to get all up in arms about and start marching just because I say there's a hierarchy and that the male voice is always a higher priority, because God made man first, whether you believe in God or not. We live in a patriarchy. As much as women do now have influence, we still live in a patriarchy. In heterosexual relationships, men are more likely to be perceived as powerful. Men are also more likely to see the relationship hierarchically organized according to a pecking order. However, partners who exercise little control in the relationship may not be a couple. They may be perceived as mere roommates who live in the same house together. So it goes back to that example of the two married people who live in separate rooms. I guess somewhere they stopped being marriage partners. And I feel like they stopped being marriage partners when they finally divorced. That's really what I believe. They might say, different because it is their marriage. But to me, as long as you are still married, you're still marital partners. And so, and I always look at that as still hope. Power as resource based. So power as resource based is defined as a struggle over resources. The more scarce and valued resources are, the more intense and protracted are power struggles. So you have a room full of nines and tens. Nines and tens are scarce, and so they tend to be valued resources. 7/8 are less scarce, so they tend to be not really valued resources in terms of nines or tens. So the power struggle then will be between the men competing for the nines and tens. They're not going to necessarily compete for a 7/8 because the 7/8 is always available. As bad as that sounds, the 7/8 will give it up quicker because they want validation. They want you to recognize them. They're usually maybe the pick-me's, and pick-me's can be, fives and sixes, but 7/8 may have come up, as people who were taunted because of how they look. And even if they actually look pretty, they can still look pretty as women, but they might have been taunted how they looked, how they dressed, or something like that. Because I've heard even light-skinned women with long hair and everything tell me or tell other people that they were taunted in school, and we were always under the assumption that the light-skinned woman, in terms of the black woman, was more preferred. Because I went to a predominantly all-black school, and I'm black myself, African American, and we might have had maybe one Latino person right before we understood what Latino meant. We just called people who looked a certain way, Mexican, because that's how I live in Dallas, and so we're so closer to the border. And we always thought that the light-skinned person was the person who, got more attention, got more favor with men. But come to find out years later, I don't know how many interviews that I've heard and watched about light-skinned women having troubles and issues, being taunted and being called, different types of names. And I thought, honestly, I was one because I'm dark-skinned. And so I've always had issues with someone mistreating me and attacking, my facial features. And so that is something that was really enlightening to me. But if the men in the room are competing, they're usually competing for the tens, right? First the tens, right? Because they are the dime pieces, right? But then if the person doesn't look completely like a dime piece, but a nine, then they're all competing against for the nines and tens. But they're not going to compete with 7 and 8s, because even if they don't get a 9 and 10, they can still walk out of that club with somebody who will have sex with him, whether it's a 7 or 8 or 5 or 6 or below. People tend to bring a variety of resources to the relationship, and men usually are the ones who have more power. However, this is changing as a result of women completing college and pursuing well-paying careers. They are beginning to bring more financial resources to the relationship, so that matters. Like I said in the beginning, like I said in the previous section, if the 7/8 is coming with resources, it makes a big difference for her. Like I said, a 7/8 can still be physically attractive, but just not be the same type of physical attractiveness as a 9 or 10. And the high value partner could still marry a 7/8 depending on the types of resources she brings to the relationship. I mentioned if she wins a mayoral race, or she becomes a U.S. or state senator, she has a big business, a brand or something like that, that raises her mate value, that raises her status. However, when she's a 7/8, men are always looking for an upgrade. And so they will upgrade to another 7/8 that has even higher resources, right? Or they would just simply go get a trophy wife who looks like a 9 or 10. And so even though women have made many strides, and they have become, and they have pursued and become independent, it's still a toss-up in terms of whether or not their resources they bring to a romantic relationship, maybe leading to marriage, are valuable enough to validate. Non-financial resources position women as having more power in relationships. So other resources such as communication skill, physical attractiveness, advice, social support, a sense of humor, parenting abilities, sexual rewards, affection, companionship, and love are exchanged in relationships. So this is that social exchange. The problem with this long listing here is there's still a hierarchy of what is important to men. And men are feel most comfortable with the person having physical attractiveness, and then sexual, variety, then likely parenting ability, and then everything else can kind of fall up under that, right? And so they still care about those three main areas, especially if they want to have children. If they don't want to have children, then it might be physical attractiveness, sexual, variety, and maybe communication skill or something. But I don't always think men look for companionship. I think after a certain age, they're looking for maybe emotional connections, but they tend to care about uh, the main three things: physical attractiveness, sexual, variety. If they care, if they want children, parenting ability. That's why they tend to choose somebody younger. And then communication skill. For me, communication skill. If I was kind of thinking about a man, I would think in terms of having a world view. But men also don't want you to know too much more than they do. So if you got a man who likes to debate, right, you are in the same industry and you're lawyers, attorneys or whatever, that might be a little different. When you're in the same industry, the same jobs, you know, there's a little bit more comfort there that you can feel more comfortable talking out particular types of issues. However, while women may have more power in private encounters with their partners, it is men who have more power in public interactions. Women often defer to men in public interactions, especially interactions with strangers where men tend to act more dominant. Women tend to be more powerful in sexual interactions, deciding when to exercise prerogative and escalate the relationship. That's why I say I go back to that hierarchy. We live in a patriarchy. Sure, we live in a democracy. We are under a republic, etc., etc. But we really do live in a patriarchy, and you have more men in the House and in the Senate and in leadership positions than women. And so it's men who are making many of the decisions that we call ourselves having problems with. And that's why you see more women running for office so they can get into these positions and make more decisions. Women do have more power in sexual interaction. Oftentimes a man will melt based upon the type of sexual experience he's having with that woman. And they do reserve the right to escalate the relationship. So that means it could move into other areas of, of, of a sexual experience. I've heard some people say that they got to have sexual variety to the point that it moves into the realm of kinkiness or something like that. And I'm not quite sure I'm up for that, but I will be up for sexual variety within the marriage context. I'm not looking to give all of my goods and all of my business to just a dating partner. Resources that each partner brings to the relationship may be reflected also in power or lack thereof. Resources may be abundant or scarce. So for instance, 7/8 are abundant. 9/10 are scarce. The power dynamic in relationships is based upon the scarcity hypothesis. So according to the scarcity hypothesis, people have the most power when the resources they possess are hard to come by or in high demand. For example, you may be attracted to several different people, but if you are in love with one of them, that person will have the most power. And that's something too I would like to think about as well, because women like to value the love that they have for a man as if it is the most valuable thing. But men value power, and knowing that you love them and knowing that you give up the sex or whatever makes them feel even more powerful, which makes them think that you are actually more abundant than scarce, because they still like to compete for you. Even if they have you, they don't want to feel like they have settled with somebody, that they always want to feel like that they have um, that they're still sort of competing for you, that you keep yourself so well that there may be a threat of you leaving or going with someone else, or another man mate poaching you, right? And so that's why it's not always a good idea for women to let themselves go. And we are all we're guilty of this, because especially women in general, once we feel like we got the man, we don't really need to keep ourselves up anymore. But prior to getting him, we made sure our hair was nice. We wore special perfume. Um, we cooked for them. If we had sex first, we gave them great sex. But in doing all of that, we just made ourselves more abundant, meaning that he can find anybody to have that done, to get that done. He's looking for the one who won't do it. See, they're looking for the ones who won't do it in terms of being able to, get their needs met. But then they're looking for the one who won't do it in terms of finally choosing a partner they can trust. And if you're giving up the sex too early in a relationship, it is highly likely that they're not going to be able to trust you, right? As much as men like to pursue one night stands, they don't want to marry someone who was a one night stand. Both men and women believe that they are resources and that they each offer something to the other. They both believe that they hold power in relationships. However, the scarce resource is only valued in relationship, and it is based upon how it is perceived. Men value sex, but women value commitment. Again, each believes that sex and commitment are valuable resources, and they will employ power to tip the scales in their respective favors. I'm not saying I don't have a lot of faith in women, and I actually might be saying that at the same time, but we have just been going about this sex exchange the wrong way. Because if we really wanted commitment, then we really shouldn't have put sex first. Because if we would have put ourselves first and advocated for ourselves and not had sex, we likely would have gotten the commitment we feel we deserved. Because we consider it as a valuable resource. But once we put the sex first, which the man values or considers as a valuable resource, we basically abandoned our own goals. We didn't really keep to what we said. So, which led to the man having more power, even though we think we have a lot of power. We don't have a lot of power. And I'm not sure we will ever have a lot of power. And so we have to do a lot better when it comes to ensuring that we have a committed male partner. And I just want to leave you with that. However, resources can also be defined in terms of money and position and status. The rich and successful are perceived as scarce and valuable. For another person, religious beliefs and family values might be perceived as scarce and valuable resources for a relational partner to possess. On the other hand, income and financial resources usually went out on the power spectrum. So everybody wants their partner to have some money or some financial resource, some job, some income. Okay. Hopefully it improves over time. But when it comes to religion and faith, those are also valuable resources and are scarce because not many people some people don't want to support a particular faith or religion. And that's why that you should not marry someone who does not support your faith or who is of not the same faith. And that's Bible. Some people don't want to believe that because we live in a democracy, but it is scripture. Do not marry unequally yoked. And you can be unequally yoked in other areas too. You can be a family person, but your partner not be a family person, not want to have kids. You can be a person who likes to only make $20,000, $25,000 a year, and you're good, whereas your partner makes double that or more, and it's too much for you. So Valuable resources are relative just as much as relationship um, satisfaction is, and you basically have to determine that. That's why you need to have the conversation, because what happens is you'll make $25,000 and you're good, and your partner makes 250,000, and then you get mad when the the more the partner who makes more financially begins to make decisions. They make decisions about when to move, what to do, what to buy, because they know they have the money to pay for it. And then you might be perceived also as a lower mate value individual, whether you're a man or a woman making $25,000 a year, and it doesn't look like your income is going to shift any more than 1,000, maybe an extra 500 a year, or probably not even that. So then there's a lot of insecurity with that as well. And so there's a such thing as assortative mating, that tens marry tens or mate with tens, fives marry fives or mate with fives, because you basically have the same sort of mindset, income, potential, thinking about life, and you would hardly ever have a lot of stresses. When you think about the Roseanne show before it became the Connors, remember when they struggled while they were raising the kids and working, factory life, but they didn't have a threat of any sort of infidelity. They just had regular struggles, going to work. He had a bike shop. Dan had a bike shop. Roseanne was working as a waitress, and then in the factory, and then different areas. And they were just basically, I don't know what you would call them, middle class or lower middle class, and they paid for the house and they paid for everything they needed to do. But once the show was about to end, and the writers wrote in how they won the lottery, somehow that changed Dan's thinking. All that time, he never cheated. He never cheated. Even when they were stressed out, he never cheated. But when they got money, that's when he had some sort of infidelity incident. And so again, valuable resources. One of you might value just having a home, going to work every day. If you make enough, if you get rich, you get rich. Because all throughout the series, Roseanne never really played the lotto. It wasn't until the end of the series. And so, but somehow Dan valued somebody else, because once he got money, that made it possible for him to basically, or that gave him access to other women um, at another level. And I don't think the other woman was any really better than Roseanne. After all, Roseanne was, just as rich as Dan. They both won. And, but somehow the money gave him access to women that he felt might have been higher in value. So just because you might think something is a valuable resource doesn't necessarily mean that it is for someone else, because the income and financial resources usually went out on the power spectrum. So once he got money, it felt like he had power. And so then he exercised power in committing some sort of infidelity against his wife, and that turned it into issues, that they had. And so again, you might value one thing, but your partner might value another. Power as less dependence and interest. So people who have more to lose have lesser power. People who have less to lose have greater power. People who are less involved in the relationship have greater power. And men who are less emotionally invested in a relationship have greater power than women. So the one who is dependent upon the other has less power, period. If you move in to somebody's house because you are down on your luck, it doesn't matter that you are an adult. They should still treat you as an adult, but it doesn't really matter that you are an adult. You immediately lose power when you move into that environment. I had a situation that created a setback in my life. I think I mentioned it on another audio, but I had a friend from a job wanted me to move into her place, and she was trying to convince me that what I was doing was sort of ill. I didn't make a good decision or something like that. The place I was living in, and the place I was living in was fine. I was paying all my bills. I was, paying my rent and everything, and my school was just the rail system away. I was actually doing better and on my way to even, better while I was in that place. So I let her convince me to move in to her place where she just wanted 275, and I was paying 600 and something at my current place. And I thought to myself, well, I guess it would be okay. I guess I'll go ahead and do that. And it was a, disobedient situation because I was Christian at the time, and I'm still Christian. And the Bible reads, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers." And so I was a believer, and she wasn't. She was an unbeliever, and so that created a setback because I had disobeyed. And immediately when I made that decision, it immediately put me in setback, which later I had to confront through correction and then overcome and then make my comeback, which is part of the process now. And so immediately, whatever power I had outside of her apartment and, moving into her apartment, whatever I had, I lost that power. I remember the friend who was taking me over to her house, and he had made us a comment while we were in the car, and he said something, and I believe it came from his soul. He don't know it, but I believe it came from soul. He said, "Now you're homeless," or you're homeless, right? And that was the weirdest thing. I'm like, how would I be homeless if I'm going to move into her apartment? But I was basically homeless because it wasn't my place. Now, of course, if you don't own the place, it's not your place anyway. But at least with an apartment, you have a lease, and they just can't so easily put you out. It's still your place on some level, right? You have some kind of legal right to it. But once I moved into her place, I lost all power. I became homeless, and I had to struggle from that situation from that January to August when I had to return. And I think I'm going to use that some kind of way in a future audio. So people who have more to lose have lesser power. So if you're married to a high value partner and you are a 7-8, even if you come with resources, you still might have more to lose because a man is only faithful as his options. And so if he comes around that he can have a 9 or 10 at a very high level, he will emotionally evict and abandon the 7-8 for the 9-10. People who have less to lose have greater power. So the high value man has less to lose because he's a high value man. He's an alpha male or whatever. People who are less involved in the relationship have greater power. So the person who is married to a core partner who barely comes home or has basically checked out of the relationship a long time ago, and it's just basically sustaining, the fact that they are still married, and because he probably doesn't want to come off any money. And then men who are less emotionally invested in the relationship have greater power than women. So men are logical creatures. That's what we really have to understand. That men are really logical creatures. They're not really going to operate from a place of emotion. When they begin operating from a place of emotion, it is them sort of operating in their feminine, and they oftentimes don't want to do that. Power as Less dependence and interest is predicated on commitment and investment. So we're always going to throw that word out there, commitment. People who are dependent on their relationships and partners are in the less powerful position, especially if they know their partners are uncommitted and might leave them. And that's always obvious. Dependence power is related to quality of alternatives. Quality alternatives is simply the types of relationships and opportunities people could have if they were not in their current relationship. And that's the thing about men. Women don't always think like that. They might think like that about a house, like they could have a better house, or they could have a better car, or they could have, you know, some material, you know, type of thing or whatever. But men are the ones who think about what they could have in another woman. They're the ones who think like that, not women. So here's a sample scenario. Jane is attracted to other men, but Bill is not attracting other women. In this scenario, Jane is the scarcer resource. She has more power than Bill in the relationship. Therefore, Bill will likely feel more dependent upon Jane, which places him in a powerless position. And this is what we call the principle of least interest. So there is a difference in the intensity of positive feelings between partners. The partner who feels more strongly is at a disadvantage when it comes to power. And you see this because the one who feels more strongly is always the one who is complaining about the relationship. When you see someone who doesn't actually sort of say anything about the relationship or don't really complain, they've gone silent, they're the ones who have the most power. If you're in love with your partner, but your partner is not in love with you, it is your partner who holds the power in the relationship. There is an inverse relationship between your interest and the partner's interest. When the least interested partner makes requests, such as requesting money or sexual favors, the more interested partner is likely to comply rather than risk losing the relationship. In contrast, when the more interested partner makes a request, the less interested partner knows that he or she does not have to give in to maintain a relationship. So you see this in films a lot, where the woman who is being emotionally and mentally and psychologically neglected is also being sexually neglected. And so she might put on a slinky dress or something like that and appeal to her partner. If you remember Tyler Perry's movie, Why Did I Get Married? The first one. And I forgot Jill Scott's character's name. But Jill Scott's character was trying to appeal to her husband. So she put on a nice sleep gown or something like that to try to, appeal to him. And he just mocked her and made fun of her and laughed at her. And so she was requesting basically a sexual favor in the sense that he's not having sex with her. Come to find out, he was having sex with the woman that she was friends with. Okay. So then he felt like he didn't really have to comply with her request to maintain the relationship. The relationship was going to be maintained regardless because he basically has the power in the relationship. He also had power over the account. So when he finally left her, when it was found out or discovered that he had been cheating with her, he basically, I think left her the house or something. And then he cleared out the bank accounts or whatever. So that tells you right there that he basically had the power in the relationship and that she was dependent on him. Even though she helped him with his business, she had the business acumen to help him or whatever. She came with resources, her knowledge, her college degree, her education, her savviness. That wasn't enough for him. Her weight was an issue for him. Her look was an issue for him. And the woman who was her friend was considered for him a 9 or 10. And so he was willing to give up the marriage, right? Not maintain a relationship for a woman who was not even near what the wife brought to the table. It was like what Tyler Perry's character says about the 80-20 rule, that you give up, how do you say, you give up 80% thinking that the 20 is 80%, when really the one you think is 80 is really 20%. I'm not saying it right, but you can always look it up, but it's an 80-20 rule. The partner who is subordinate in the relationship has less power. Values such as self-focused autonomy and connectedness both influence power in the relationship. Where partners value mutuality, equality is most likely. So power as enabling or disabling. So power can enable or disable. There's a catch-22 with power. People often want the personal agency that comes with power. However, excessive use of power could affect interpersonal relationships and closeness. People do not like to feel dominated, and they will often resist and reject when they feel coerced. And so this usually, I think, happens in the workforce. It may also happen in, family dynamics, especially with a parent-child, relationship where the parent is still having problems with understanding that the child is not a child anymore and the child is an adult. And you might see that the parent employ excessive use of power as if he or she is still parenting the adult like a child. And people tend to reject and resist when they feel coerced to do something. And in that dynamic, coercion could be really reflected in the way that the parent is punking the adult. And no one likes to feel like they are being punked. And so people will, leave relationships simply because of that sort of toxic dynamic. Power can be used to enable self-confidence, expression, and energy to shape and achieve goals and maintain good relationships. However, power can be disabling when it leads to destructive communication patterns between partners and within other types of relationships. So there are two types of destructive communication patterns. So the chilling effect and then the demand withdrawal pattern. And we're going to look at both. So with the chilling effect, the person with less power is unlikely to communicate grievances with the relationship to the other partner. The chilling effect occurs in less committed relationships. Partners are afraid to respond to relationship problems out of fear of losing their partners. Partners avoid negative relational consequences, and problems remain unsolved. This reminds me of still a person in a childlike mentality that if they say something wrong to the parent, they're going to get into trouble. They don't want to risk the parent being mad at them or getting upset or utilizing discipline or something like that. And so the woman who is in a less committed relationship, who feels less powerful, is usually the one who is afraid to respond to relationship problems out of fear that she will lose the partner and will avoid relational consequences. And then, of course, the problems remain unsolved. So the demand withdrawal pattern occurs when one partner makes a demand and the other partner becomes defensive and withdraws. When people feel powerless, they sometimes enact, demanding behavior to try to change their partner's behavior. For example, women tend to seek change in the relationship more than men, which places them in a powerless position and demanding role. So a lot of times you might see the woman use an ultimatum. because if we are enacting, any kind of demanding behavior, it is usually because we are using an ultimatum to try to guide and change behavior. Well, whatever we do in the romantic relationship, it is likely something that was done to us, or what we saw. And what we saw and what was done to us is usually within the family dynamic. You have a parent who is it's hard for the parent to get the child to change. So then the parent will utilize or enact a demanding behavior, right? Tell the child, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this, right? To try to change the child's behavior, but it doesn't change. And so the parent then, even though the parent is a parent and clearly a parent, the parent, in trying to get the child to change their behavior and unable to, they end up in a less powerful position. How many shows have you seen, episodes on Dr. Phil, of kids at varying ages and stages hitting their parents and cussing out their parents, and the parents, going off somewhere and crying about it, and, yelling or something like that? There is no discipline for the child who hits their parent in the back or throws something across the room or something like that. And so then the parent becomes actually the child, and then the child becomes the parent. And so the parent is losing power, losing that power dynamic. It is the prerogative of the partner with more power to create and break the rules. According to the prerogative principle, powerful people can violate such norms, break relational rules, and manage interactions without as much penalty as powerless people. So, like the rich person, wealthy person who's a high value partner, he can cheat. There is really not going to be any sort of consequence for him unless he's cheating with someone on the job and the person accuses him of, sexual harassment. And we already have a few, instances brought on by the Time's Up movements and Me Too movements of men acting badly. For example, a person with higher status at a company can arrive late to a meeting without consequence, while a subordinate might be suspended. In romantic relationships, the person who cares the least may be able to get away with arriving late for dates, forgetting birthdays or anniversaries, or even dating other people. And when I think about that in terms of relationships, when you continue to take somebody back, these are some of the factors that you have to consider if you decide to take them back or if you decide to not take them back, because people do what they want to do. If they really want to be in a relationship with you, they will allocate every effort at mate retention. They will make sure they do what they need to do. Now, no one needs to get on their knees. No one needs to beg. No one needs to lie to you, placate you. But in a basic, in a foundational romantic relationship, you shouldn't have to feel subordinate to your mate. You shouldn't feel, there's always going to be some kind of power dynamic in every relationship, but it shouldn't be that you have to remind your partner that you're sleeping with, paying bills with, living in the house with, that they need to remember your birthday or remember your anniversary or continue to arrive late for dates. To me, they don't want to be in a relationship, or they may be trying to punish you. Whatever it is, it has to get resolved, because you can't live like that. What if every time you have a situation, and he or she decides that they want to continue to do exactly the other thing. And then once they decide that they want to date other people, it's better to let them go. Because if you take them back after their decision to date other people, you will always be in a perpetual powerless position. It is the prerogative of the powerful partner to manage verbal and nonverbal communication. So, it's almost like a partner is training you like a dog, and you do have some relationships that are like that they're almost training you like a dog. They start and end the conversation. Well, in a romantic relationship, especially a dating relationship, to me, I think is more democratic because you have a viewpoint and he has a viewpoint. When you get into a marriage relationship, however, there's always a hierarchy. Maybe the man, the husband, has final say on certain things that go on in your relationship, especially the finances. But the wife might have final say with what goes into the house and how much in terms of finances, right? It just depends. But when a person has more power than over another person, they control the communication. So how many times have you heard somebody say marital relationship or just regular romantic relationship, I want to feel heard. I don't feel like I'm heard. Can I talk? I remember someone saying that oftentimes people in relationship are not really trying to listen to you. They're just waiting to have their turn to talk. And you gotta be an active listener. That's what we teach in college. English. I teach English, and that you have to engage the text. Write down notes or take notes or anything like that, or record what you have just learned. Otherwise, you will lose it. So if you find yourself in the same situation in your romantic relationship, someone or both of you are not taking notes. You're not keeping a journal, or you're not mentally taking notes of each person's issue, because you shouldn't have to continue circling the same argument. Every time you look up, every time you turn around, you're talking about exactly the same thing. So for instance, if your partner cheated on you and you decided to take him back or take her back, and every few months that partner tends to bring up what you did, right? Well, something didn't get resolved the last 3 months, or the 3 months prior, or the 3 months even prior to that. And so somebody is not being heard. Somebody is not actually revealing what he or she actually thinks about the situation. All you know and all the other person knows is that one partner was accepted back into the fold, right? Accepted back into the marriage, into the house, into the finances, into the life of living a married person, but almost without consequence. Because again, if you're talking about it again, that means that there wasn't really a lot of consequence for the cheating partner. In terms of verbal behavior, powerful people initiate and manage conversations, change topics suddenly without warning, interrupt others from completing a thought, and terminate discussions at will. So I've had a relationship like this with my mother. She would sort of feign this idea that she wants to talk and have a conversation, but then somehow when I get into a deep analysis of the topic, making connections or something like that, she immediately gets offensive somehow. It's not like I'm charging her with an offense, but something in what I'm saying or how I'm saying it is offensive, and she will immediately get up and go to the room. Or it can be just a regular engaging conversation, and like clockwork, she'll get up and go to the room, or she will immediately answer phone, or say that she has to go and call someone. I forgot to do something or whatever. And then I'm sitting there in the living room on the couch, on the chair, waiting for her to return. It's a power struggle, because it's not like I can get up from the chair and go sit somewhere else and it not be perceived as disrespectful. But in some ways, I may have to do that. Now, we're not in contact right now. We are estranged. And in some ways, I kind of have the power struggle. But it was very much like what you see here on this slide, the interrupting of others, to where I couldn't complete a thought, changing topics, terminating the discussion at will, even though she would initiate the discussion. I found myself later, because I didn't have the prerogative to speak as a child. I was silenced. I was, isolated, and the environment was toxic. When I grew up, I found myself talking, for one, and then I found myself talking over others, for two. And I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I just realized that I hadn't been talking. Other than being in a classroom and you're talking or something like that, that's different. But I realized in some ways that college opened up my mouth. For one, you have to talk. And then for two, you have to present something that is worthy of discussion. I found myself being received in my immediate classroom context. But I did not find myself received in my immediate friendships. And it seemed like those friendships mirrored my home life. There was like the one person who was like the leader of the pack, and she kind of set herself up to be that way. And she would sort of discount everybody else in terms of what they had to say. And then when I was off with other people, I would sort of interrupt others from completing a thought. Again, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but when you are silenced, when you are socially isolated, when you are pushed back to actually becoming a loner, when you do get a chance to talk, you want to talk. And then when you get a chance to talk, you are perceived as being too talkative, right? Then that creates an even different power struggle, because the person who is telling you that you are talkative is essentially saying you basically need to shut up or don't talk as much. And so then when I used to people please, I would just cower and sit back and not say anything, or I would just impose a silence because I was offended at them making the comment. So power dynamics, you can find people trying to control the verbal communication, trying to shut you up. You see these in group dynamics all the time. Again, the leader of the pack, and then there's always someone they target. There's always a person that they target, that they try to scapegoat, that they try to make as a problem, and then they begin to facilitate conversations around that person, pitting the larger group against that one person, and then the one person against the larger group. So once I realized that I was doing that, I was just waiting for the other person to talk, right, to give my viewpoint, or I was just interrupting others. I started to be conscious of that, and I started to learn how to teach myself how to wait. Sometimes I slip up and struggle a little bit, but for the most part, I do my best not to interrupt someone else's communication. With regard to nonverbal behavior, powerful people often initiate touch because they are perceived as having more power in the interaction. This includes teachers, superiors, and lawyers. However, a student or subordinate who initiates touch would be perceived as being inappropriate with a teacher or superior. So, I remember being in a women's studies class. I think it was maybe women's studies 1 or 2. I can't remember. And the teacher was part of the LGBTQ community right before we started to use that collection of letters. And I don't know, out of some strange feeling or something like that, she gave me she returned our papers, and then I patted her on the back. I don't know why I do that, like an old lady or something like that. And she called attention to it. And I'm thankful that she did, because it was kind of like initiating touch. Now, I'm not part of the LGBTQ community, but from that experience as a college student in her class, I watch what I do with my own students. And I've noticed that one student out of my whole time of teaching might have initiated touch, because she probably thought like me. You sort of hug on people, and you pat them on the back, or something like that. It's just, I don't know, it's just some sort of weird little habit. But students can't do it. I make sure that students don't even come around my desk where I'm standing, because there has to be a clear line between teacher and student. And there's always a tendency of students to, kind of come around where you are to talk to you. And so I have to make sure that I set that standard. Even when I'm talking to a student by myself, with them in a classroom, unless there's another student outside waiting, I make sure the door is open, because in that way we are basically both sharing power in a sense, right? Even though I'm the teacher, I'm trying to make sure that student does not feel like he is powerless in a situation, that he feels he is protected. So that was something that I thought about from the time I was in college to the time I became a teacher, how important it is, your interaction, and how important it is as an authority figure, that you do not initiate touch like that, because it can be perceived as harassing, and then later as sexually harassing. In conclusion, power dynamics in romantic relationships are often not balanced. Instead, they tend to reveal that one person holds all the power and the other partner is subject to navigate the relationship with permission. Power in romantic relationship making is perceived as effective when one person doles out the power and looks the part of being powerful, and the other partner accepts his or her powerless position. Most men hold the power in romantic relationships because of their status, resources, and their economy. However, women also hold power in romantic relationships because of their ability to produce. Power is only influential when it creates and effects change. All right, so hopefully you were able to gain insight from this video discussion. Please like, subscribe, and visit. So Please like the video, hit the notification bell for more discussions. I am re-uploading all of my audios, so I needed to make some changes to them. You can visit my website for more content at reginayfavors.com. If you want to send me an email, you can send an email reginayfavors@yahoo.com. Please also purchase the book. It's going to come out in spring 2021, so I had to make changes to my book to update it, and I also updated the title. So the original title was Bait, Hook, and Switch, Confessions of a Rebound Girl, and I have updated the title to Toxic Encounters, Why People Pursue Rebound Relationships. So right now I'm still basically editing it, and I want to make it available in spring 2021. So thank you very much for visiting my channel, and I am Regina Y. Favors. Have a great day.